Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about long division. But before we start doing long division using polynomials, we need to review a little bit how to divide like we learned in 3rd or 4th grade. I'm going to give you a basic example on how to divide, and then we're going to use all of that when we do long division with polynomials. So let's say I want to divide 236 divided by 6. Before we do that, let's name all these parts in the division. This number we're dividing by, this is called the divisor. The number we're dividing into is the dividend. And when we're done dividing, the answer that we write on top of here, that is called the quotient. Very important for you to learn these parts. Let's start dividing. When we start dividing, we ask ourselves, what do I multiply 6 by to get 23? Or a number that's close to 23 or less than 23, and that number is 3. 6 times 3 is our next step, and we write our answer, 18. After that, we subtract. We get a 5. We check, make sure that this number here is less than our divisor, and then we bring down the next number in our dividend, which is a 6. And we start all over again. We ask ourselves, what do I multiply 6 by to get 56, or close to 56, but less than 56, and that number would be 9. And then we multiply 9 times 6, you get 54, and we subtract. This number is less than 6. I have no other numbers to bring down, so we call this 2 a remainder. And also in elementary school, when you started dividing, you would always be asked to check. And the way we check this is we take our quotient and we multiply it by our divisor. And then we add the remainder. We should get the dividend. So when we checked, if that end result was equal to 236, then our division was correctly done. So let's check. To check, this is what we do. We say, well, our dividend has to equal. Our dividend is going to be equal to me multiplying my quotient times the divisor plus the remainder. So let's do that. Our dividend I will get if I multiply the quotient. The quotient in this case is 39 times my divisor, which is 6, plus 2. And if you use a calculator, or if you want to multiply it out, this is 234, and you add your remainder, you get 236. You get your dividend. So this means that this division is correct. When we do long division, it's very similar to our basic addition, except that now we're working with polynomials. And it says here to divide this polynomial by this one. Since we're dividing by this one here, this is what we're dividing by. This is our divisor. And this is our dividend. Remember, the divisor is always outside. So I have x squared, well, I have it typed out. This is the setup. Let's see if I can erase this x. Okay. So here's my divisor, here's my dividend, and we do the same thing we did with simple division. You ask yourself, you always look at the first term here and the first term here. That's all you look at. You ignore the rest for now. So you ask yourself, what do I multiply x squared by to get x cubed? And a lot of students get confused here because they forget this basic property of exponents. When you multiply two bases, two variables that are the same variables, what happens is that their exponents are added together. So I would add 2 plus 1 because this exponent here is 1. So when you multiply x squared times x to the first power, you get x to the 2 plus 1, which is equal to x cubed. So what happens is you add exponents when the bases are equal. So when we talk about multiplying x squared times something to make it x cubed, well, that has to be x, because if I multiply x times x squared, I will get x cubed because I add the exponents. So once you place this x here, you're going to multiply that x by this term, by this one, and by this one, by all three terms in your divisor. So let's do the first term. X times x squared would be x cubed. X times 3x would be 3x squared. Notice how I write my answers directly beneath the matching power term. So my x squared term I wrote directly underneath my x squared term in the dividend. And then the last multiplication is x times -1, which is minus x. The next step is subtracting. Now be careful here. When I subtract, I'm subtracting the whole polynomial. So this minus sign outside this parentheses means that all of these signs in here are going to change. So this is equivalent to adding the opposite. So this changes to a negative, this changes to a negative, and this changes to a positive. And now I add. I have x cubed minus x cubed. That's going to give you 0. They cancel out. 2x squared minus 3x squared, or you can say 2x squared plus -3x squared. That gives you -x squared. And your next one is minus 5x plus x, -4x. And then you bring down your last term here, which is minus 6. And you start all over again. You're always going to try to match this term. You want to match this term. You have x squared, and now you ask yourself, what do I multiply x squared by to get -x squared? That would be by -1. And then you take -1 and you multiply by each one of these terms, just like we did before. So -1 times x squared is -x squared. See, we've matched. -1 times 3x would be minus 3x. And -1 times -1, that gives you +1. The next step, remember, is to subtract. Put these in parentheses. And remember that this minus sign changes all the signs inside. So it's equivalent to saying plus the opposite of this one, the opposite of that one, and the opposite of that one. So I have -x squared plus x squared. That cancels out. -4x plus 3x minus x, and minus 6 plus -1 is -7. Now I compare this result to my degree. The degree of my divisor is a 2, degree 2 polynomial. This is a degree 1 polynomial. When I have a result that is a degree less than the divisor, that's when I know when to stop, because I can't multiply x squared by anything to get x. So this is the end of this division, and we call this result the remainder. So the answer to this division is your quotient, which is x minus 1, remainder, -x minus 7. If we were to check this like we did with the simple division, this is what we do. we have to multiply our quotient times our divisor, and then we add the remainder, and we should get the dividend. Let's do that. Let's write it out. It says that my dividend, I can get my dividend by taking the quotient, multiplying it by the divisor, and adding the remainder. And we're going to do just that, just to make sure that I divide it correctly. So this is going to equal, my quotient is x minus 1. My divisor is x squared plus 3x minus 1 plus negative x minus 7. That's my remainder. Let's go ahead and multiply these out. I'm going to multiply the x by each one of these terms here. And when I'm done with x, I'm going to take negative 1 and multiply by each one of these terms. So x times x squared is x cubed. Remember, when we multiply equal bases, the exponents are added. X times 3x, that's 3x squared. And x times negative 1 is minus x. Now I take my negative 1 here, and I multiply negative 1 times x squared, that's negative x squared. Negative 1 times 3x, negative 3x. And negative 1 times negative 1, that's plus 1. And I bring down my remainder. I'm going to add plus negative x minus 7. Now I combine like terms. X cubed doesn't have any other like term in this expression to combine with. X squared does have a like term, so I will add plus 3x squared minus x squared, and that gives you 2x squared. My next term would be my x terms, so I have negative x minus 3x minus x. That gives you a total of negative 5x's. And then I have my constants. So I have a plus 1 and a minus 7. That gives you negative 6. And make sure that this result that you got is equal to your dividend. And it is. That means that this checks out.